We're going to spend about 45 minutes talking about the Standard Response Protocol. Like many districts across the country, we're incorporating the Standard Response Protocol into our emergency procedures to improve student and staff safety during an incident or emergency. The Standard Response Protocol is not based on individual scenarios, but on a response to any situation. There are reserved slides for discussion where we can ask and discuss any questions. The I Love You Guys Foundation was started in 2006 by Ellen and John Michael Keyes following a school shooting that took the life of their daughter, Emily. The foundation is committed to school and community safety and family reunification following a crisis. Its programs, which include the Standard Response Protocol for K-12, have been implemented by over 25,000 school agencies and organizations across the United States and Canada. Since then, millions of students, hundreds of thousands of educators, administrators, and school staff, and tens of thousands of first responders have all begun using the same language, same training, same expectations of behavior during a crisis. The Standard Response Protocol is based on 5 actions that we take during a critical incident: lock out, lock down, evacuate, shelter, and hold. Each action is followed by a directive. Every action then has specific instructions of what to do in an emergency situation. When these are announced, the action and directive are repeated. Here's what the directives state: lock out, get inside, lock outside doors. Lock out, get inside, lock outside doors. Lock down, locks, lights, out of sight. Lock down, locks, lights, out of sight. Evacuate to a location. For example, evacuate to the water tower. Evacuate to the water tower. Shelter for a hazard using a safety strategy. For example, tornado warning, move to your designated shelter area. Tornado warning, move to your designated shelter area. Hold, hold in your classroom or area. Clear the halls. Hold, in your classroom or area, clear the halls. We'll talk about lock out first. Why might we announce a lockout? There's a threat outside of the building. In a lockout, no one is allowed in or out of the building. There might be police activity in the area, or civil unrest, or an animal on school grounds whose presence may be concerning, or someone who enters school property and is behaving in an uncooperative manner. In a lockout, no one enters or leaves the building.
Lockouts are typically called for by law enforcement officials.
Hi, this is Evan with the Broomfield Police Department.
Or district personnel.
A lockout. Okay, thank you for the information. Bye-bye.
Attention students and staff. We're going into lockout. Get inside. Lock outside doors. We're going into lockout. Get inside. Lock outside doors. Staff, check your email for details. Staff, check your email for details.
The goals of a lockout are to get all students and staff inside the building.
Guys, come on in. You need to get inside. Go up to the first classroom on the right. Hurry, 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 hurry.
And then lock all exterior doors. In most cases of a lockout, it will be business as usual inside the school. However, in some cases, a lockdown may also be issued in conjunction with a lockout, particularly if the threat is near the school.
Let's start with student instructions on what to do in a lockout. The first one is simple: get in the building. For the most part, it is business as usual inside the building. Once all students and staff are in the building, no one is allowed in or out of the building. If a lockout lasts into recess or lunch, still no one is allowed in or out. We're staying in the building. The same is true at the end of the school day. Let's move on to lockdowns. Lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. Lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. Lockdown is used when there's a threat inside the school building or on school property. This could be an armed intruder or some other danger that could result in serious injury or death.
If you are in a classroom when a lockdown is called, the main thing to remember is locks, lights, out of sight. As students gather in a safe area of the room, lock the door and turn off all lights. Have everyone in the room move to a location that is out of sight. Pick an area of the room that can't be seen from interior windows. An actual lockdown may not be resolved for several hours. Here's how you should wait. Stay in the safe location. Don't move around the room. Remain silent. Staff, take written attendance of who is in the room. Note anyone missing and if you have any extra students or staff.
Now, we'll talk about what students should do in a lockdown. Students should stay out of sight from the corridor window, sit on the floor, and get low. How do you know if you're out of sight? If you can't see the hallway window, no one in the hall can see you. A locked door is a proven time barrier. Be absolutely silent. Students need to turn their phones off in the initial stages of a lockdown. No sounds or lights should come from phones. Most incidents are stabilized in 3 to 5 minutes. At this point, your teacher may give you permission to text your parents. Regardless, know that you may remain in lockdown longer until the police are able to safely and completely clear the building. Do not open the door for anyone. Law enforcement will unlock the door and release the room. Only law enforcement is trained to know when it's safe enough to open the door. What if you're outside? If you're outside and a lockdown is called, do not go back into the building. Rather, go to a safe location. Maybe that's a local business, a friend's house, or a library. What if there's no teacher? Students should get behind a locked door if possible. If you can't get to a safe, lockable room, one option is to hide. You may try to evacuate if the threat is not in your immediate vicinity. As a last resort, you may need to defend yourself. We'll be checking the halls for students to get them into a classroom quickly before we lock and turn lights out. Follow adult directions. Get to a classroom, any classroom, as quickly as you can and lock down. If the classroom is already locked, then students should find a place to hide. You should not go from classroom to classroom. Evacuating may be another option.
If a fire alarm sounds, do not leave your safe location unless you are certain that a fire is threatening your room. If you are forced to evacuate due to a fire, keep in mind that the hall may not be your best escape route.
Can students text their parents? In the time immediately after a lockdown is called, no. Everyone must turn off their phones and remain silent. As the event evolves, you may have the opportunity to text your parents. If the school goes on lockdown, the school district notifies families quickly and updates them regularly. That was locked down. Now, let's talk about evacuate. There are a few different types of evacuations we should talk about. The first is a typical fire or gas leak evacuation in which staff and students leave the building in an orderly fashion. Another is self-evacuation in response to a school violence event if it's not possible to get behind a locked door. And then there are police-led evacuations. In its most traditional form, evacuate is how to move students in an orderly fashion from point A to point B. A fire drill is really evacuate out of the building. With the standard response protocol, evacuate is always followed by a location. For instance, evacuate to the water tower. Evacuate to the water tower. Let's talk about what students do in this type of evacuation. You'll leave your stuff behind. Whatever in your pockets is what you can bring. Students will need to follow staff directions. During an active violence event, you will have the option to self-evacuate if getting behind a closed, locked door is not possible. That's exactly how Carly Posey's first grade students survived the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. When the shooter, who was in his classroom, paused to reload, he and 8 of his classmates ran out the room and out of the school. Consider grouping up with others when self-evacuating. Some questions to consider when making this decision. Can you visually see the door you're going to go out? Do you know you can make it there? Anyone who chooses to run should commit to this action. And you should remember that police will be arriving, so you need to keep your hands up and empty while running out of the building.
During the initial moments of a school violence situation, the official call for a lockdown may not have occurred or not have been heard by everyone. You need to assess your personal safety. Consider your best option. This may include staying in a classroom behind a locked door, hiding, or evacuating. Self-evacuation, which means exiting the school and leaving the campus, is an option. If you're in a hallway, common area, or near an exterior door, self-evacuation may be your best choice. Once you've arrived at a safe location, you should immediately check in with your parents and the school district to let them know you're safe. When law enforcement begins the evacuation, here's what to expect. An officer will unlock your door and enter the room. Stay where you are. The officer will give you specific instructions you must follow. You will be asked to leave your stuff behind, form a line at the door with the teacher in front, hold hands with the person in front of and behind you until you reach your final destination. Wait quietly for further instructions from the officer. You will be told to proceed to the next officer. Walk, do not run, and do not talk. Follow the directions of the officers guiding you during the evacuation. They could be giving you verbal directions or hand signals. Watch the pace of your line. Be aware of obstacles such as corners, fallen objects, debris, or stairs which may affect the speed your line can move. Don't stop until you reach the location you were directed to.
Keep moving all the way to the end of the fence. All the way to the end of the fence. Keep moving.
Verify attendance and wait for further instructions.
Connor.
Here.
Andrew.
Here.
Here's what students will do in a police-led evacuation. It's important that students keep their hands visible to the officers. The same is true for staff. You're going to be tempted to record what's happening on your phones. If you saw some of the cell phone footage from a mass shooting at a mall in El Paso, it's recorded by an individual evacuating the building with her hands up and her phone in her hand. That's an example of what not to do. Officers need to see your hands are empty. Most likely, you'll be asked to leave your stuff behind. Law enforcement might tell you to put your hands on your head, keep them up in the air, put hands on shoulders, or hold hands. Follow their directions. You can bring phones in your pocket. If it's in a purse or backpack, you may not be given the opportunity to grab it. Don't be surprised if officers are loud and directive. They don't know the extent of the incident yet. They will give you direct instructions that you should follow. Again, be sure to keep your hands visible. Why do we keep our hands visible? Law enforcement officers are trained that hands can hold dangerous things. They will want to see your hands. Law enforcement might tell you to put your hands on your head, keep them up in the air, put hands on shoulders, or hold hands. Follow their directions. Will police search you in a police-led evacuation? In some cases, during a police-led evacuation, officers will want to verify that students and staff aren't at further risk. They may search students and staff for other dangerous items based on their observations. It is important to keep your hands free and visible. That was evacuate. Now let's talk about shelter. Some of you may have heard the term shelter in place. Unfortunately, there are many different things that shelter in place could mean. With the standard response protocol, we shortcut it to state the hazard and the safety strategy. So, what's a hazard? Something dangerous. It could be environmental, like a tornado, and it might be something like a chemical spill nearby. Your safety strategy is what you do in response to the hazard. The announcement could include the hazard, for example, a tornado, and the safety strategy, move to your designated shelter area. For example, attention students and staff, we are under a tornado warning. At this time, move to your designated shelter area. And this would be repeated. When instructed to take shelter, you will be directed to your designated shelter area. Always be prepared for the unexpected. Continue to listen for instructions. The situation could change quickly. Be aware and prepare to evacuate if directed. Stay sheltered until an all clear is announced. That was shelter. And finally, we'll discuss hold. Hold in your classroom or area. Clear the halls. Hold in your classroom or area. Clear the halls. It's used when we need to keep the hallways clear. This could be due to a medical emergency, a dysregulated individual, a large spill of some kind, or a fight. Here's what students do. Students in the hallway should go to and stay in their assigned classroom. Remain in the classroom until the hold is lifted. What about class changes? If you're in the hallway during passing time, the announcement might be made to go to the nearest classroom or directed to proceed to the next scheduled class. Listen to staff instructions. If the bell rings during the hold, stay in your class until the hold is lifted. It's a shared vocabulary among staff, students, and first responders during any type of crisis or emergency here at school. As a district, we're joining millions of students, hundreds of thousands of educators, administrators, and school staff, and tens of thousands of first responders who are now using the same language, training, and expectations of behavior during a crisis. If you want to learn more about the Standard Response Protocol or the I Love You Guys Foundation, go to iloveyouguy's.org. ILOVEUGUYS.org.